Hello, this is David Braun. I've got my contact information at the top. And what we're going to do in this video is we're going to demonstrate an advanced ranking application. So we'll do that in just a second. And we also want to take a minute to organize our thoughts, or maybe my thoughts on the modernization of the appraisal process. Now, I had a call talking about where I've been for the last 5 years. I got 3 different appraisers that I've known to call me in the last few months and say, what's happened to you? I haven't seen or heard from you. We usually hear from you, and, your website's down. I think really the truth is, at my age, they thought probably I'd passed away. But I've been here and I've been working actually on what I would call the modernization of the appraisal process for 20 years, because back in 1997, I began trying to program new applications that would be appraiser-assisted models. And I presented one in at the year 2000 in Las Vegas at the Appraisal Institute annual convention. So I've kind of been involved in this part of it for the last 5 years. So what I've been doing is in about 2008, I developed a regression program and sold it with about 100 pages of learning material on how to run a regression analysis. And after a few years, I would get information or talk to people, and I noticed that what I was doing was I was kind of reading stuff in books and just kind of regurgitating it back to the appraisers. And that's not really where I started. I didn't start trying to read statistics books and then interpret it back or teach it to appraisers. I started with basic, programming and trying to develop applications. So basically I've gotten back to that. Now, one of the things I did was I wrote the book, The Valuation Analyst, and I recommend that. You can go to Amazon and put in The Valuation Analyst by David Braun, and it will pop up. I highly recommend it. It's not a statistics book. It is a research book, and it gets away from general terms. Well, we do discuss statistics some, but basically it's about the pragmatic side of statistics and appraiser analysis. So I worked on that. Then I spent a good bit of time on something called the Compass application, which we're not going to get into here and talk about it. I spent over a year, and when I say how long I spent, I worked about 20 hours a week on this type of projects. I didn't work 40 hours a week. So when I say for 5 years, I've been working on these projects, it's about half that really, because I only work about 20 hours a week on it. But I spent about over a year on the tea leaves, which I showed in video 1, which is down here, the tea leaves. And then after that, I worked on an advanced ranking application, and that's what we're going to look at today. Then besides that, I spent a good bit of time trying to improve the theory of analysis by trying to develop new analysis techniques to mitigate the random variance in sales prices that result in price prediction errors. So that's kind of big, and that's what I'm going to start moving to wind up, my 2 cents. But right now I'm talking, my 2 cents mainly to appraisers. So let's get back up to the modernization of the appraisal process. First, I would change that word from process to appraisal practice, from appraisal process to appraisal practice. The reason being, we're not really changing any of what's in the Appraisal Institute principles book that they call now the valuation process. We're really not changing those steps. We want to be broader than that. We're really looking about changing appraisal practice in general. Now, and the goal up here, I think it's really to get a better value and to get it faster. Okay. Now, what I've noticed is a lot of the improvements we've made, and people think of some of the modernizations that we've got, we're really just putting, running shoes on the tortoise. We're trying to get these running shoes to make the tortoise be more sure-footed and be faster. But there's some extreme limitations to what the tortoise or the turtle is going to be able to do, no matter how good the tennis shoes are. So I'm absolutely 100% for electronic distos and going out in the field with electronic data gathering methods to work better. I'm all about that. But for me, it really comes down to the part of the modernization of appraisal practice that I call databasing and analysis confidentiality. Now, gathering the data is part of databasing, so making that an electronic system is great. But let's talk, I think when I talk about appraisal practice, we actually go all the way to USPAP, to scope of work, to databasing and analysis. That's the ones that I spend a lot of time on, and reporting. So let's talk real quick about USPAP. I like USPAP. It's a little bit long and repetitive. I don't like some of the places that are repetitive, because you say it once and people understand it. You say it 2 or 3 times, people begin to get confused. The only other problem I really have with USPAP is the confidentiality rule that says that when you perform an appraisal and you have an opinion, such as the quality rating or the condition rating, you can't share that. It has to be kept confidential. And most of the time we think about appraisers in a group in a city, maybe 8 or 10 of them getting together and wanting to make a database and share it. And then the problem is, can you put the quality and condition that was your opinion, or in highest and best use opinion, can you move those over into a database? And the general thought now is that you can't. Now, what I would wonder about that is, if that's true, that would mean that if an appraiser went out and looked at a house, say house A, and he had the quality and knew it was above average, and then wanted to use property A as a comparable in another appraisal. So then that sounds great, because the appraiser's been in the other house. He's got really good information. So the appraiser comes down and in the comp puts that the quality or condition is a certain rating. In my opinion, at that point, he's probably going to violate the confidentiality rule, because that appraisal is going out to probably a different client. And also it's going to eventually end up in the hands of the neighbor of property A. And then they're going to say, hey, did you know, I see here your house, it's not near as big as you told me it was. And according to the appraiser, it's run down. So you get in all these issues. So I do like the idea that it's confidential, but it's not practical. It's a business decision. Our goal is the public trust and be worthy of belief. And if we have good data that we can't use, and we say, yeah, I did that analysis, I had some really good data, but my standards won't let me use it and apply it, I don't think that's right. So I think we need to kick out the confidentiality rule. Now let's get down to scope of work. I like scope of work. I like what it is. I don't think we need to change that. Now, databasing and analysis, these are big, because if we can get data in quick and then use the right analysis application, whether it's tea leaves or whether it's your URAR report, or whether it's what I'm going to show you today, I was looking for it here, but it's the ranking, here it is, the ranking application. But we want the data to come in quick, and then we want analysis that we feel confident gives us a good answer and faster than we can do it. And that's where I talked before about the tea leaves. Now, reporting is another issue. I have a problem with reporting in general. If you go to the doctor, say I go to the doctor and I say I have a sinus issue, and the doctor examines me and says, you have a sinus infection, I'm going to prescribe these antibiotics, and I want you to take them till they're all gone. And if you have any problems, get back with me. Otherwise, see you later. Well, maybe I would look at the doctor and say, as you're a patient and your client, I want to be sure what you're giving me is correct. So what I want you to do is go into your records and find 3 people that had a similar sinus infection that you prescribed these exact pills to, and I want to see those outcomes. And I'd like that to be in a 10 to 20 page report. Okay. Now, what would the doctor say? Or most people would say, well, that's silly, but that's what appraisers do. You go to an attorney and you say, my neighbor felled an old tree. He was trying to cut it down. It came across my fence. And my neighbor now is telling me that that was an act of God because it was an old tree. And I personally think because he was sawing it, it's not an act of God. That person caused it and they need to move the tree and fix my fence. And the attorney says, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to, don't have any conflict with this person. And the attorney's going to send a letter out advising them to remove it and to, repair the fence or pay for the damages. And then I would look at the attorney and I would say, okay, since I'm your client and I want to be sure the advice you're giving me is correct, I'd like for you to give me 3 cases where trees were fell across someone's fence and were in a similar letter, and what were the results or the outcome of this? Well, that would seem absurd, but again, that's what appraisers do. So now I don't really have an answer. I do know we have restricted reports. Most of what we talk about in the modernization of the appraisal practice, usually we're thinking in terms of mortgage lenders, and their regulations say they must be able to follow through. I don't know if there's a good answer for this, but I was going to bring it up. Now, let's talk real quick before I get into the next ranking application, and we're just going to cover it quickly. So if you're wondering if this is going to drag on, it probably will drag on longer than it should. I'll probably ramble more than I should, but it's not very long to watch it. So I did want to mention to you with tea leaves, I looked it up the other day, and I know that a lot of people may look at that tea leaves and say, well, that was done on a spreadsheet, and it was done on an Excel spreadsheet. But there are spreadsheets and then there are spreadsheets. So I got to looking, and there are probably 4 hidden workbooks, and each of them have, maybe 100 calculations on it. So every time that a macro directs something to run and Excel calculates, it calculates probably 400 items just to do what the macro tells it to do. Now, when I looked up the macros and I copied them over and put them into Word, and then I looked, there were over 3,000 lines of macros in the tea leaves. So when you think of tea leaves as an application, I'm going to guess, and you can see it here, I'm going to guess that when you run a tea leaves and you put in a range of market conditions, it's going to run about 100,000 calculations. So it's important to know that this is not these kinds of things are not little things. They're really not like a spreadsheet with a few functions on it. Okay, then in video 2, and I'm going to mention this 1 and 2 in case you haven't seen them, you want to try to watch those, was how tea leaves could just be used in an evaluation, and then there was it was applied that it could also be used, as part of an appraisal or a review analysis. Now, in this video, we want to talk about when you use an analysis or technique, it depends on, and this is important, it depends on the degree of random variance in prices in that market. And also I'll add in that it could also be caused from bad data, also could cause some more randomness that we have to deal with. But there's randomness in our data, primarily in our prices. And so which application you would use, whether you're going to try to extract adjustments, and sometimes you can't extract adjustments because you don't have enough sales, or whether you want to use regression analysis, and if you have a very, very active market and the degree of random variance is not super, super high, it's a great method to use. Now, what controls the random variance in prices? Let's just get a little review here. It's really dependent on the efficiency of the market, How many buyers and sellers? Are they knowledgeable? And are the properties homogeneous? This is textbook stuff here. So what I wanted to lead into this, that the tea leaves would be something that you could use. It was designed with only 5 sales. So it was designed to be used in a market that's active, and the degree of randomness is not maybe super, but it's not really meant. Well, it can be used, but if I was going to go into a market that was highly efficient and I had 20, 30, or 40 sales, I would probably jump to my regression analysis program. So what we're looking at now, when we jump down here to a ranking application, this would be for times when you say, I don't even have enough sales to begin to mathematically extract any adjustment rates, okay? So that's where we're going here. And then I'll mention to you, what if you get an area that's just terrible? I mean, you really don't have many sales at all. And in that case, you're going to rely maybe on your cost approach, or you're going to rely on your cost approach methods of extracting adjustment rates, okay? So let's jump right in now to this program, or this application I'm calling advanced ranking. So what it starts with is I'm going to put a subject in. And by the way, ranking analysis is a recognized technique in the principles book for a direct sales comparison approach. So this is something that you could show a reviewer, or if your state was upset with, why did you do this different than we usually do it? And you could show them that in the principles book. So here I've set up, because this is more mortgage lending, so it needs to be followable, or the reviewer or the underwriter needs to kind of be able to see what you did and why you did it. And this is also a form of augmented intelligence. And I'll show you why in just a second. So first you put the subject in, and I think these are already ordered pretty much by the sales prices. So what we've got here is, I want to find 2 houses, and unlike normal comps, I want to find 2 properties that are in general better than the subject, and almost everybody would agree with you. Then I'd like to find 2 comps that are maybe like the middle 2 that are more similar to my subject, and then 2 comparables that everyone would agree are not as good as my subject property. Now, what this helps with then, in this case, I'm really only have 2 traditional comparables. The other 2 in a URAR report we probably wouldn't use, because they're going to be much better and much worse. But in this case, we want that. So as the evaluator, I look at the data and I say, wow, I don't have enough data to do a regression analysis. I don't even want to try to do the tea leaves. I don't want to put it on a URAR report because I can't show how I got my adjustments. So they would say, I'm going to do this method. So here's, and also this method will work with commercial. I've done it with commercial, but right now we're looking at a residential. So basically, once these are on and we rate these property variables, they're all rated. Okay, then I'm going to put in, and this is where it is augmented intelligence. I'm going to tell it what the appreciation rate is, and as the evaluator, I'm just going to have to do the best I can. In this case, it was 4%. I've got an effective date. So then I tell it to apply that rate, which I'd already done it, so it should stay the same. And if these were out of order, I would say, okay, auto sort them. Now they're sorted. Now, where it's augmented intelligence, the appraiser is the expert, and the appraiser is going to say, where does the subject rank in these properties? And you might say, well, I think it's, these had basements, this didn't have basement. I think maybe it's similar to 3, or it's similar to 4, or in this case, I'm going to make it be right between 3 and 4. So I want the subject to be numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to put 4, but I want it to bump this 4 to be 5. So I'm going to tell it to bump. And if I didn't want it to bump, if I said it was exactly like this one, I would hit match. So I bumped it. Now, what I'm going to do here then is I am going to get the outputs. I'm going to go ahead and run. Now it's going to warn me this effective data value is because it's an older analysis, and it's warning me that maybe I forgot to do that, but that's the way it's meant to be, so I'm not going to correct it. Then this is your main valuation sheet. And you can read this. I'm not going to go through it and read it, and take a look at what it shows. And these charts here are for these, go with these 1 through 7. That's what, 1 is 1, 2 is 2. And then it shows, if you run a straight line, where some of these sales are on this line. Okay. So it shows that. So then it gives us a MAPE, and remember that's from a residual analysis. That's the mean absolute percentage error. Gives the average deviation of those numbers. Some of the residuals, we like it to be 0. And then it gives us kind of a value. And this would allow the appraiser to also step in. There's a help button to help. Or if I thought, well, I think that's a little high, I could use this arrow to make it a little bit lower. You see the 115. Or if I thought it was a little bit low and I had reasons for it, I would jump it up until it changed. I don't see it changing down here, but it should change. And I think maybe this was set up as an eval, so there's some concessions taken out. But basically, that would be the end of it. You would fill in this data sheet, and then you would rank it, and that's where the expert ranks. Then you would run it, you'd get your outputs, and then you would modify your outputs if you thought it was slightly higher or low, and then you would have your number. Now, remember I said in the beginning that I listed these variables so a reviewer or someone could follow your work and say, you said that you thought it was between sale 3 and sale 4, but I think it was more like sale 6. And then you could argue about these rankings and whether it was or it wasn't. So that's the idea. But these aren't essential to what we're doing here. So what I realized after I did this, I could leave most of these off. Now let's say that a broker wanted to use this, a salesperson to get a listing, and maybe the listing person thinks, or the property owner thinks, their house is worth too much, and they say, wow, I want to get some numbers. They could actually come in and I have an application designed for that. I'm not going to pull it up and show it to you, but basically, they would just put part of this information in for each of the 6 sales and then rank the subject, hit a button, and it would give them an answer. Okay. Now, I want to add, and also let me add that an individual, for example, you think about the the realtor's website. Or you might think of places like Zillow and CoreLogic and some of the big companies that have these. This could be set up the same way for an individual that's searching those sites. For example, they might find 8 or 9 houses, and they might say, I'm going to drag comp 1 over, and they might have a little box for comp 1, and they drag it over here. And then they'd say, I like this one out of the 20, and drag it over. And then they would end up with 2 better, hopefully about 2 the same and 2 not as good. And then they would hit a button, and then the individual could probably get a better answer than what some of the built-in AVMs give them. Okay, so this has a lot of potential for that kind of use. That there's a lot that goes on in the background besides just plotting 6 sales prices and then plotting the subject in there. There's a whole lot more that goes on than that. It's way more accurate than that. So let's stop there and we'll talk about some of that. Let's go to the conclusion and wind this video up, okay? I do want to mention the Valuation Analyst book, and remember, it's pragmatic. For example, an appraiser might ask me, this is perspectives here, an appraiser might ask me and says, David, if you've got an MAI, SRA, and review designation, and you've developed regression analysis and other programs, and you've got a product like maybe the tea leaves that runs 100,000 calculations, and they might come up and say, and you tell us you're usually within 5%. They're probably, the appraiser's perspective would be, why can't you be more accurate than that? Okay, why can't you be more accurate than that? And I want to look at what a 6% variance is, plus or minus 6% variance is for a $240,000 property. So you add the plus 6%, you go to 254. You take a negative 6%, then you're to 226. So what we're saying is, where the intrinsic sales price is 240, then what you get in your actual sales database, or what the actual price was, could be anywhere from 26,000 to 226,000 to 254,000. That's a plus or minus 12% range. Not a plus or minus, that's a 12% range, plus or minus 6% range, but it's a 12% total. There's a $27,000 difference. Now, if you're trying to do a paired sales with something like this, and a property just happened to sell low, and the next time it just happened to sell high, you've got a $27,000 margin. Now imagine if you're doing one paired sales, and that's your first paired sale as a sale of a property, a repeat sale of it, you're $27,000 off. Now, if you're trying to extract the value of a swimming pool, you're going to be off that amount of money. In fact, the valuation analyst book does some calculations on how good one paired set of sales is, and then it looks at what happens if you add more pairs of sales and run it. So this book's important, and it's not a regurgitation of basic statistics, although we do define some statistical techniques that we need, but that's not what it's about. Now, but let's look at the perspective of an AVM technician or a predictive price modeler, more of a statistician. When we talk about as an appraiser being within 5%, and when I talk about the tea leaves in specific to have 5 variables that need to be adjusted and be within 5%, where the appraiser said, why can't you be more accurate? They probably say, how are you that accurate? Okay, because these have two different perspectives or mindsets. Now, what I had to do to make that work, I couldn't get it to work with traditional methods. I developed and applied new analysis techniques, okay? They're designed to mitigate a portion of the random variance which results in price prediction errors. So if you're an AVM technician or a predictive price modeler, I believe just with, 20 or 50 lines of code, you may be able to knock another % off with these techniques. Now, I'm going to be presenting these techniques in a fundamental method. Now, I've developed most of these about 3 years ago, but I don't want to present them the way I've got them now. I want to present them the way they were developed, and then the AVM technicians can use them or not, and the predictive price modelers can use them or not, or actually even help develop them into more uses. So I'll be getting into that. So I'm very excited about that. So watch for that to come. And again, my name's David Braun, and thanks for watching.